reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Mark.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Jesus and his disciples came down the mountain and began to go through Galilee, but he did not want anyone to know about it. He was teaching his disciples in this vein: the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men who will put him to death. 3 days after his death, he will rise. Though they failed to understand his words, they were afraid to question him. They returned to Capernaum, and Jesus, once inside the house, began to ask them, "What were you discussing on the way home?" At this they fell silent, for on the way they had been arguing about who was the most important. So he sat down and called the 12 around him and said, "If anyone wishes to rank first, he must remain the last one of all and the servant of all." Then he took a little child, stood him in their midst, and putting his arms around him, said to them, "Whoever welcomes a child such as this for my sake welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but him who sent me." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
So I was going to go 57 different directions with this until I went out for dinner Friday night and Saturday night. I'm sorry. I went out for dinner Friday night, and I did go out for dinner Saturday night, but what was more important was my noontime experience. But first I'd like to ask a question. The question goes something like this. If we believe, and I do believe, or as my conservative Lutheran friends used to say, I believe, teach, and confess, that we are all saved. That Jesus came to set us right with God, and that Jesus, being good at what he did, accomplished that. And so there is no question but that we're going to heaven. Then the larger question becomes, so why are we here? Well, I think there's a two-part answer to that. The first part is that Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is among you. And he said that 2,000 years ago. So even if you want to say that the goal of Christianity is to go to heaven, what Jesus has said is that the kingdom of heaven starts right here, and we're in it, and we're living it. But if the goal of Jesus was only to get us to salvation, then he sure did a whole lot of teaching and a whole lot of talking about that. And not just that, but about a whole lot of other things. And a lot of the Bible is about behavior. A lot of the Bible is about the way to live a good life. And it's also been said that the goal of the Christian is to imitate Jesus, to follow that example. And I want to say that there are two parts to the Christian experience. One is gaining that reassurance that yes, we are in fact saved and it's going to be okay. And the second part is to be able to live our lives in such a way that it's not so painful and that it's not so difficult, and that when we encounter our problems, we're not so depressed. And I would like to call that, I'd like to steal a term from Bishop Joan Salmon Campbell and call that experience Christ Enlightenment. We're here to figure out how to make our lives better and the lives of those around us. And to do that, we need to be in relationship with Jesus, and that's why we come to church to talk about how to do that. And so here come my stories. Friday night, went out for dinner at Hui's, one of the best Chinese restaurants in town on 88th, between 88th and 89th and North Avenue, on the north side of the street near Club Tap, Steinkeller's, and a mobile gas station. And they have a wonderful buffet. It's a small buffet, but it's good. It's really good food. And then you can order from the menu. Aaron and I went, and we were doing the buffet, and a man came in with 3 children. And I know how old they are because she had asked them, because it matters for what you pay for children. I think under 12 there's a different price. And so the children were 8. One was turning 10 the next day, and 12. And so they were out of control. I mean, there's no other way to say it, but they were out of control. But not all of them, and not all in the same way. The youngest one had a really high voice, which I found a little grating as he sat right next to me. he had to continually ask his father, why weren't there meatballs on the buffet? Sometimes there are meatballs on the buffet. There weren't Friday. The oldest one, who was 12, and the soon-to-be 10-year-old, the 10-year-old as of yesterday now, had to ask what everything was on the buffet, despite the fact that he was old enough to read, and there was a sign right over everything that says, orange chicken is orange chicken. And 12-year-old's asking, is this a grape? And flying around the place back and forth, and just kind of chaotic. The 10-year-old had the gravelly voice. What's this? What's this? What's this? And the other one's going, why don't they have meatballs? And he's saying, what's this over here? And the 12-year-old's going, is this a grape? And I want to scream. Dad's got no control, and Mom's at home getting ready for the birthday party. We learned all this because they were sharing it rather loudly. Dad goes to the bathroom. It's a couple that owns the place, and the woman does the waitressing, the guy does the cooking, and there's some other people that work there too. And she came over and asked the boys had somehow thrown a couple of noodles, lo mein noodles, under the table. Now, noodles don't bounce, they stick to you, so how they got under the table. But she asked them to pick up the noodles. Well, Dad gets back from the background, and the story is that she yelled at them that, there weren't any noodles under there and all this. The 8-year-old's running around carrying on about the meatballs, and finally the father says quietly, look, there aren't any meatballs. That's just the way it is. The 10-year-old says loudly, Dad, you don't need to make a huge scene about this. And I'm sitting back in my chair going, what am I hearing? And the kids are telling the father how to behave because our culture says in certain parts that somehow the goal isn't to shape people to live responsible lives. Somehow love has become letting them do whatever they want.